Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Inner Conquest, the world's greatest modern metaphysics channel. So today we're going to be talking about the second of the 12 qualities of mind as listed by Neville Goddard. So the second quality is Andrew, which represents courage. So when you have law of assumption, right, you have essentially three-dimensional spaces within which you're operating, okay? So if you want to take your third-dimensional reality as your physicalized reality, that's one aspect. You have a reality in your mental space, which is called a fourth-dimensional reality, which is essentially the space within which thoughts, emotions, and all of that stuff is conjured, right? So if I have a coffee cup here in a third-dimensional reality, that's physical. If I hold the image of an orange coffee cup in my head, I can see it right there. That's exercising fourth dimensional control. Fifth dimensional control is the I amness, or the all space that observes that fourth dimensional reality and then also observes the third dimensional reality, right? So you can extrapolate the mind into these three-dimensional spaces, and it's useful. It's all one reality, but it's useful for understanding how to influence specifically the third dimensional reality by operating in that fourth dimensional reality, right? Because if you're just operating in that third dimensional reality, then you're significantly limited because you don't have that imaginative fourth dimensional reality under your control, and it's not poised to directly influence that third dimensional reality. So you're working at a smaller bandwidth of your capability, if you will, right? So when you look at the second aspect of mind, which is Andrew, courage, what that means is that if I hold an assumption, I do not ask the third dimensional reality for help once that frame in the fourth dimensional reality is fixed, right? Because you have your fourth dimensional reality in your mind, but additionally, that reality can be pushed out in a way where it is essentially you're operating behind the scenes of a third dimensional reality, right? So a good example would be if I have a bank balance, right? And say my bank balance is $10 million and I want my bank balance to be $100 million, okay? So if I have a representation of that bank balance, which could be on my computer screen, right? You log into your portal, that's your bank balance. You log into your phone, that's your bank balance, right? If you had $1 million, you'd have a feeling state of what you would feel like personally if you had $1 million in the bank, right? Alternatively, you'd have a feeling state if you had $10 million in the bank, right? So when you have a feeling state, what you would do, say you're the person with 1 million and you want to go to 10 million. Instead of taking third dimensional action and doing all these different things, if you're leveraging law of assumption to create, what you would do is you would form a mental assumption of the feeling of having that $10 million in the bank, right? So you would hold that fixed assumption and you would begin to live in the wish fulfilled, which means that you would walk around doing daily tasks while being consciously aware of the feeling state of how much money you have in your account, and you would change that from the third dimensional reality, right? So if you had a third dimensional reality where the crystallized, hardened reality was 1 million and you're going to 10 million, you would hold the feeling state of the 10 million until that assumption hardens into a fact, right? So what happens is once you hold that assumption or you change that feeling state, you'll have your current reality deny that. So what'll happen is you'll have somebody, your banker, call you and be like, hey, you're in the tax bracket for a millionaire. You have $1 million. You don't have $10 million, right? You have all of these different things that from a third dimensional five senses standpoint that will deny that assumption, right? Because you've just shifted that fourth dimensional reality to the feeling state of having the 10 million, but the third dimensional reality has not reflected that yet. There's no ideation of how it's going to happen. There's no clear process or understanding from your perspective of how that's going to physicalize, right? So what happens is once you take that mental assumption of it already being done, that wish fulfilled state, Now you're thinking from the state of having it, right? I'm so happy and grateful now that I have $10 million. I'm so happy and grateful now that I can invest in things that I didn't previously have access to. I can rest easier now that I've 10x'd my net worth. I have enough money to buy these houses. Now I'm looking at these houses because when I had $1 million, I would look at these houses. But now that I have $10 million, I'm looking at these houses. See how you like build that type of inner dialogue based off of thinking from the state rather than of it. Now you're thinking from the state, but what you cannot do is rely on third dimensional reality to validate your assumption, right? So that's what Andrew is. Andrew symbolizes courage, because if I make a mental assumption, it takes a level of boldness, audacity, and faith in the law to hold that assumption without having any type of support systems validating that, right? So when you have an assumption that you hold, that assumption will harden into a fact, right? That's the whole premise of law of assumption. Assumptions harden into facts. So what your primary trait is that you're developing and embodying is persistence. So when I make a mental assumption, I've shifted the feeling state, the vibration of that fourth dimensional reality to match my desires, right? And so I can do that because I understand, right, when I become conscious, that what I had previously created, the $1 million in this scenario, right, that came from my previous assumptions about what was possible, how much I have in there, etc. But now I'm consciously engineering that feeling state to go to 10, but my mind has never been there before. There's many different belief systems that may come up and counter that, say, well, it took you this long to work for this money. How are you going to have that in a reasonable amount of time? All that shit, it's all fucking nonsense. That's your mind not accepting that assumption immediately, and that's okay, right? Because what happens is third dimensional reality moves a bit slower than our fourth dimensional reality. I can go to Paris right now in my mind immediately. I can visualize being on the Eiffel Tower, right? That's the power of that fourth dimensional reality. So how does that fourth dimensional reality correlate into affecting the third dimensional reality in precision in terms of what I want? How do I get this thought to turn into a thing? Well, I persist in it, right? When we're not in a slowed down dimensional space, like a third dimensional reality, thoughts will manifest immediately. When we're here, it takes persistence because the lag time is a little bit higher. So what we want to do is understand that once we take that mental assumption, that is essentially the blueprint that will unfold by its very nature of having access to that assumptive end, right? So if I have ideation of a feeling state for 10 million, that means that I have access to a reality in which that 10 million is already present. The only thing that I need to do is maintain that assumption and walk as if it's already done and learn to live from the feeling of the wish fulfilled and from the end in terms of my daily conscious state that I am dwelling in. So when I take over a state, when I assume it's already done, or I take an assumption, that living in the end is my process. It's not the middle of how I get from 1 million to 10 million. And that's a little bit confusing because if you live your entire life operating pretty much exclusively in that third dimensional reality, you're very concerned with the why or how it's going to happen, right? So when you take that mental assumption, you have to literally quantum jump to that end and remain fixed in that end. And that's a disciplinary aspect of your mind that has to be properly disciplined. I'm not perfect with it, right? I take assumptions and I second guess myself. I do this shit all the time. I'm learning just like you guys are, right? I'm getting better every single day. But what you have to do is understand that faith means loyalty to an unseen reality. So if everything is happening right now, right, and you can hold the mental bandwidth or the feeling state temporarily of having that 10 million or having what you want, your goal is to make that temporary feeling state normalized in terms of that is where you default to. Because if you build a conscious state where you're at 10 million, what'll happen is if you're comfortable at 1 million, you'll default back to the conscious state of having a million because it's more broken in, right? I use the example of having shoes, right? So if you have really comfy sneakers and you buy really nice new shoes, but they're not broken in, what do you do sometimes? You're like, man, I really like these shoes, but I need to like break these in. I'm going to wear my comfy old sneakers because they've already been broken in, right? Even though you have the new shoes that you want, you still have to break them in. And that's how conscious states are. And specifically in regards to Andrew, with the courage aspect, this involves not asking for help from the 3D once you take a mental assumption, right? So if I put my mental assumption at 10 million, it's already done. Anything that comes into my periphery that's like, well, hey, maybe do this type of thing to do this. No, it's already done. I'm thinking from the end. I'm thinking about how that money is going to be spent. I'm thinking about how it's going to be invested. I'm thinking about what that feeling state looks like to go from 10 million to 20 million, right? Not saying that is like what everybody has to do, but you're stretching your mind from a baseline assumption of what your current reality is. And it's a little bit different thinking. Most people don't think this way because they need that validation from the third dimensional reality to tell them what is possible, right? And so you're breaking that need to hear from your environment that validation of what is possible. And also, when you have the need to go and try and make it happen or try and do something, it means that you're not in that state, because if you had the thing, you wouldn't need to go do something to ensure that it actually manifests, right? And don't ever judge yourself for not getting this perfect, right? You're disciplining a latent quality of the mind that has been underdeveloped in every single human that exists on the planet, right? So like by even being aware of this stuff, you're activating aspects of yourself that most people will never be even aware of in their entire lives, right? So give yourself a little bit of a pat on the back for even working on this aspect of yourself and disciplining this aspect of your mind, because it's legit fucking sorcery, right? So like when you hold a feeling state, you are changing the energetic dynamics of your environment in real time. And all you have to do is stay affixed to that end, have the daringness, the boldness, the assumptive power that you are a creator of your reality, not just a participant. And when you hold that assumption, it will harden into a fact. But the power comes from you holding the assumption, not from whatever circumstance is brought about in the third dimensional reality to give an excuse for why that manifests, right? So if you have the feeling state of $10 million and then you win the lottery versus somebody gives you some inheritance versus you strike it big on a business deal, it doesn't matter, because the end is what you're after, right? And so once you start crafting from the end, the ways and means that it comes to you, you want to almost leave more open, because that allows for more malleable pathways of manifestation to flow to you, right? If you affix that it has to be done this way, you have to do this, then you're cutting off potentiality, which will sometimes lengthen the time that it will take for that thing to come to you. So when you see it as done, it's not that you are audacious or just, ridiculous. It's like, no, this is the end point, universe. This is the end point. Now figure it out how this is going to happen, because you have people, places, circumstances, and events that are always changing in a landscape. How can these coordinate themselves to arrive at this GPS coordinate, right? That 10 million is this GPS coordinate. This is where I'm going. So you're constantly saturating your mind with that endpoint and focusing in on, okay, this is the endpoint. This is where we're going. This is where we're going. This is where we're going. This is where we're going, until that subconscious or, universe, if you want to call it, whatever you want to call it, finally gets it through its thick skull that this dude's not giving up. This is where we're going. So now we have to get on board. We have to coordinate all these different aspects to ensure that this endpoint is reached in real time. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. This is the second installment of the 12 Qualities of Mind. If you guys want coaching, click the link tree below for calls, emails, texts, all that good stuff. Additionally, Blow up the comments section with different videos you want made. If you guys have anything that is bothering you or something that you want clarity on, feel free to put that in the comments section, and I'd be happy to make a custom video for you because I'm always looking for great topics that people want. So other than that, the most important thing, go conquer, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.